Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, we're into the tail end of this debate on the address and reply, and I rise to speak in favour of the amendment put forward by the Leader of the Labour Party, David Shearer. I've listened to most of this debate, and in fact I listened to the speech itself. And, Mr Speaker, it's a clear sign the government's in trouble when they spend most of their time talking about the opposition. And that's exactly what the National Party have done during this debate. They have spent most of their time talking about the opposition. And I guess that's not surprising, because actually if they were talking about themselves it wouldn't look all that flash. Because hasn't the rhetoric changed from the National Party over the last 3 years? 3 years ago, John Key promised New Zealanders a step change. And in fact what he's delivering is a step back. He promised the step change, everything was going to be rosy under a national government, and in fact he was going to be straight up and give straight answers, and now when he's asked a tricky question, we live in a dynamic environment. So the rhetoric is changing from the National Party. He was going to close the wage gap with Australia and stop everyone leaving. Do we remember John Key there at the Westpac Stadium in Wellington talking about how many New Zealanders have left, were leaving to go to Australia? Well, three times that many people have left to go to Australia since National took office. We could fill the Westpac Stadium 3 times over with the number of people who have permanently relocated to Australia since John Key became the Prime Minister. Perhaps that could have something to do with the fact that unemployment is up by over 50% since the National Party took office and counting. 150,000 New Zealanders, 157,000 New Zealanders out of work under this national government. John Key promised an aggressive recovery to the recession, and now we're just muddling through. Those are his words, both of them. First it was an aggressive recovery, now we're just muddling through. Then John Key, both accurate according to Michael Woodhouse, where it's an aggressive recovery, we're going to muddle through. Well, I think most New Zealanders would see that for what it is, a government that simply doesn't know what it's doing. It is simply muddling through. It is managing the decline rather than getting New Zealand back on track. John Key, before the 2008 election, was, quote, all about building assets. Now he's, quote, all about selling assets. That's what John Key's all about these days, all about selling assets, managing our economic decline. And in fact, what is the clearest indication of National's management of our economic decline? It happened just before the election. The first credit downgrade New Zealand has had in 13 years, and it wasn't just one downgrade, they had a double downgrade. You know when the last time was that we got a credit downgrade? The last time Bill English was in charge of the country's finances, back when the National Party were in government in the 1990s, was when we got the credit downgrade, because Labor did a good job of managing the economy, and by Bill English's own admission in the House today, he has overseen the largest explosion in government debt ever in New Zealand's history. The largest explosion in government debt ever in New Zealand's history. That is the legacy that Bill English is going to be leaving future generations of New Zealanders. A massive explosion in government debt. In the meantime, he's busy focusing on hocking off what's left of the family silverware. Mr. Speaker, the question we need to ask ourselves, the question that every New Zealander needs to ask themselves when they next vote in 3 years' time is, after 6 years of a John Key national government, are we better off? What do we look like as a country? They have higher unemployment, more government debt than ever before. Their kids are going to be going to schools where they have more kids in front of every teacher in the classroom. Students will be paying more than ever before for their tertiary education. Families will be paying more than ever before when they go to the supermarket because of the National Party's increase in GST. They will be paying more than ever before every month when their power bills arrive, and that problem is only going to be exacerbated when the National Party hock off the energy companies. What will New Zealand look like after 6 years of John Key's government? Well, there won't be many assets left to be sold, because we know one thing about this government: if they can't sell it, they're going to cut it. If they can't cut it, they're going to contract it out. That is the mantra of this government. That's the mantra of this government. Leave nothing behind for future generations. And the New Zealanders, after 6 years of a national government, will fast find themselves becoming tenants in their own land as National presides over a further sale of our land to overseas investors. New Zealand will have been, for 6 years, dragging behind when it comes to leadership on environmental issues. Some of the first measures that this government implemented back in 2008, within weeks of taking office, were to wind back leading legislation on environmental protection and turn the clock back. That's exactly what this government are going to do and have been doing for the last 3 years and will do for the next 3 years. National's agenda for the public services has got New Zealanders rightly worried because they were conned by the National Party, who promised that their cuts to public services would not affect frontline services. Remember that rhetoric? They're going to move resources from the back office to the front line. Well, have they actually lived up to that? We've seen in recent weeks examples of District Health Board after District Health Board cutting frontline services because of Tony Ryle's funding cuts in the health service. For 3 years now, we have seen a steady stream of older New Zealanders have their home help cut because of Tony Ryle's cuts in the health service. Now they are promising to cut funding for teachers and have bigger class sizes. Those are frontline services again on the chopping block under a national government. We've seen dock rangers have their funding cut, the number of dock rangers cut, customs biosecurity staff. Such a vital role they play in New Zealand's economy has been cut under the national government. And now, in these last few weeks, we look at what they're doing in Housing New Zealand, which is one of the clearest illustrations of the hoax that the National Party played on New Zealand when they said they weren't going to cut frontline services. With Housing New Zealand closing local offices and replacing them with a call centre. And what's more, there's no guarantee the call centre will even be in New Zealand, because John Key's talking about contracting out those types of back office functions like call centres. So somebody in Taita or Pomari or Cannons Creek who has a problem with Housing New Zealand could end up on a call to somebody in a call centre in Mumbai trying to deal with this problem, where previously they had a local Housing New Zealand office that they could go to where they could get assistance. And this government, this national government, are closing down those frontline services. This government are far more interested in what they can do for their mates than they are in what they can do for ordinary, everyday New Zealanders. This is a government that already are totally out of touch with the concerns of ordinary New Zealanders. We've got John Key talking about how important jobs were. It was his number one priority when he became Prime Minister, with jobs. He even had a job summit where he promised New Zealanders he wasn't there to talk about the economic recession. He wasn't there to blame the economic recession. He was there to do something. He was going to do something about growing unemployment. Well, what's the track record been there? A 50% increase in unemployment under this national government. 157,000 extra New Zealanders out of work under this national government. And what does his Minister of Finance, Bill English, say about that? Oh, well, there's not much the government can do about that. That's what Bill English says. So while John Key made it his number one priority when he first became the Prime Minister to deal with this rising tide of unemployment, Bill English says, not our fault, can't do anything about it, sorry, you're on your own. That's the message that Bill English is sending to New Zealanders who have found themselves out of work, that they are on their own. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. This government have a responsibility. If they're going to pull the rug out from under New Zealanders, pull the safety nets out from under New Zealanders, they have a responsibility to make sure they are creating jobs for them. Because it's all very well to say to people, we're going to cut your benefit unless you go and get a job. Where is the job? I think it's actually very reasonable to say to New Zealanders, if they can work, they should work. But where are the jobs? 157,000 of them have disappeared during the tenure of this government. Cutting benefits won't solve that problem. Creating jobs will. This government have no plans and no ideas about creating jobs.
I call the Honourable Minister Hiki